in terms of.
Welcome to this festive edition of the Soccer Wire podcast, or as I like to call it, a Festivus edition. I'm Mark Serber, and I got a lot of problems with you people, and now you're going to hear about it. Seinfeld? Anyone?
I got a feat of strength
Anyone?
for you.
All right, we do got someone. Well, maybe not for this particular generation of young players, but we are creeping up to kickoff for the 12th episode of the Soccer Wire podcast, where we'll discuss the role U.S. soccer has played in the professionalization of youth sports. It's Wednesday, December 18th. Christmas is a week away, and we are so happy to have you with us on the Soccer Wire podcast. We are back with you for the weekly show that focuses on the youth game and player development in the U.S. I'm joined by all the usual suspects in Soccer Wire founder Chris Hummer, resident analyst Charles Boehm, producer and editing maestro extraordinaire Bridget Baker, and joining me now is our managing editor, Quinn Castile, who will kick us off with this week's biggest stories. Quinn?
Thank you, Mark. First off, College Cup wrapped up this weekend with Georgetown beating UVA in the final on Sunday night. Just an incredible game. Ended 3-3, and Georgetown ultimately won in PKs over number one ranked Virginia. But really just a great back-and-forth game. Both teams scored a goal late in regulation, and it really lived up to the hype as a College Cup final. Only disappointing thing for me was basically almost everything surrounding the game. I didn't like the scheduling by the NCAA to put it on a Sunday night in the middle of, NFL season. The crowd wasn't, what you would hope for a game that's pretty close to where both teams are from. And I just didn't think that the supporting, environment around the game really did it justice, the quality of the game that we got to see.
Yeah, and Charles Boehm, the quality of the game, it seemed like it was a really good showcase that college soccer still has a big part to play in our landscape.
Yeah, I'm going to be writing something on this week. Y'all check soccerwire.com. I'd love to start a conversation about it. It's become very fashionable to kind of crap on the college game, and there are obvious flaws. I think this was a spectacular advertisement, and it shows you when you get down to what's actually happening on the field, the quality of the players, the commitment, the coaching, the potential that's there is so enormous. So many of the problems are institutional in terms of the NCAA. This very antiquated, dismissive attitude that the NCAA as a monolithic organization has towards the sport of soccer, probably for both genders, but particularly so on the men's side. And I think we were talking earlier that you start to see how transformative even the act of going to a 2-semester season, having this game in May, being able to promote it. Again, I drink the Sasha Ostrowski's Kool-Aid here a little bit because I'm generally in favor of the proposal, and we're going to be tracking that issue closely in 2020. It looks like we may get some breakthroughs. You start to get a sense of a lot of unfulfilled potential that could be unlocked by that schedule change in the college game.
Yeah, and one of the things was, obviously the weather can be brutal in May and North Carolina as well, but it just looked absolutely gross.
The semis
the
in
conditions
particular,
they were playing in.
The semifinals were held in a torrential rain. Obviously, it's not as pleasant to go out to a soccer game and watch in those conditions, much less in an open, uncovered stands like they have down there at WakeMed. And the presentation, of course, we were not even going to really have time to get into the built-in flaws of having top athletes play 2 top-level games in a 48-hour period, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
and I'll just cap that off real quick. I believe if I'm seeing this correctly, the listed attendance for the game was 8,413. And watching the game, if you watch the game, you definitely know that is not a real number. That's not how many people were at the game, not even close.
There's lies, damn lies, statistics, and then there's NCAA attendance statistics at soccer games.
Well, or the fact that they were all just under the one overhang that's probably in WakeMed. But, I think you're right, Charles.
However, I think they actually could get that number, again, if that game had been played in May or June. If you watch events like the College World Series, they get great crowds, and they're not competing against the NFL, playing in, one thing to play in a torrential downpour in May or June if it happens to be raining that night versus a torrential downpour in December, not too many people are going to be up for that. So,
oh, absolutely. Well, going from the championship college game to a group of players who hope to one day play in that game for story number 2, Quinn.
Yes, the U.S. Soccer Girls DA Winter Cup wrapped up this weekend, and 32 teams won the championship groups in the U15 to the U19 age groups. And under this new DA Cup format, those 32 group winners all earn advancement into the Spring DA Cup, which is going to also have its own champion, but also postseason playoff spots up for grabs as well. So congratulations to all the teams that advanced in that event.
Charles, do you like this new cup competition and the playoff implications it has at the youth level?
I like the idea. I'm kind of reserving judgment to see how things play out over the longer term. I think there's something to be said for trying to replicate the professional rhythms where you have, you're battling on multiple fronts, and there's a different vibe, sort of like multiple seasons in one, and there's a different vibe in the knockout competitions. As always, though, there's the risk of this. There's a limit maybe when you're in sort of the snow globe that sometimes these top level leagues become, as opposed to having something that's a little bit more open.
And somebody who actually was in Florida is going to feature in story number 3, but she wasn't with any of the DA teams. She was with the under-20 women's national team for the Nike International Friendlies.
Yes. Trinity Rodman, a U.S. youth national team forward. She's the top-ranked forward for the class of 2020, has signed with Washington State University, and that's just a huge, huge acquisition for that program. And she's actually the daughter of Dennis Rodman, obviously the famous former NBA player.
The Worm.
Yeah, so just a pretty big news this week with that signing by Trinity Rodman.
Yeah, and Trinity Rodman actually scored the game-winning goal against the France under-20 side, which is the reigning European champions. She was excellent throughout the Nike International Friendlies. So, obviously you have the whole former athletes aspect of that storyline, but what a huge coup this is for Washington State. She's an amazing player.
Yeah, and just a little background on her. She not only has played with the U.S. youth national teams for a number of years, her youth club is SoCal Blues, and anybody familiar with the youth game knows that SoCal Blues is just a powerhouse. They actually went and won the ECNL championship this past summer, and she's represented one of the best teams in the country. Actually, a couple of her teammates are also going to be playing for Washington State. So don't be surprised if they're in the College Cup in the next couple of years.
Well, they were this year, just falling in the semifinals. So I think on the road to possible repeats, especially depending on how long they actually have Trinity Rodman for, because if she makes the U20 World Cup squad, despite the fact she's 17 now, might only be 18, they might not have a few of those players for a large portion of next season. But the other thing is they haven't actually announced when or where the women's U20 2020 World Cup is actually going to be. So stay tuned for that, because Quinn Castile is going to get that up on Soccer Wire as soon as that announcement is made. He's Quinn Castile. He keeps Soccer Wire current. To read these stories and more, be sure to log on to soccerwire.com. We've reached our first hydration break, but the rest of the group will join Quinn and I to discuss the role of U.S. soccer in the professionalization of youth sports. If you run a youth soccer tournament and are looking to attract more teams or increase the quality of teams you attract, SoccerWire.com is the place to turn. You can list your tournament in our online directory for life for a small one-time fee. And for even more exposure, you can feature your event annually to unlock many more branding features and automatically include your event in our weekly email blast. The Soccer Recruiting and Tournament Wire to over 80,000 subscribers across the country. To browse our tournament directory or submit your own event, visit SoccerWire.com and click on the tournament link in the top menu. And if you manage 5 or more events, simply use the Contact Us link to request a custom quote. Welcome back to the Soccer Wire podcast. I'm Mark Serber alongside Quinn Castile, and we are joined now by Soccer Wire founder Chris Hummer and the one, the only, Charles Boehm. And today's roundtable discussion is the role of U.S. soccer in the professionalization of youth sports. Now, regular listeners of the Soccer Wire podcast know that usually I tee up Charles Boehm to get us into a topic, but I'm about to go on a Serber sound off, so just bear with me here. Now,
Buckle up.
Yeah, absolutely buckle
Is
up.
this your airing of grievances?
get
Your
a couple-
biggest grievance?
Yeah,
Okay.
airing of grievances before you guys go into the strengths of the feats of strength. So, yeah. All right, the topic for today. How has U.S. soccer professionalized the youth game? Have they? You betcha. But the same people that are crying foul are the same people decrying the fact that U.S. doesn't produce enough players. U.S. soccer is simply following a model that has already existed in the rest of the world. While their mission statement does say that everyone should play soccer, it is their job to create a professional pathway for young players. First of all, the same thing has been happening around the world at Ajax, Manchester United, Borussia Dortmund, at Boca Juniors, and no one there whines the way American soccer fans do. We are 13 years into this, and it is a long game. Manchester United just played its 4,000th consecutive match with an academy player in the first team going back 80 years. It is a long game. If the first cycle produced a Christian Pulisic, Weston McKennie, Tyler Adams, and every 6 to 7 years we produce 3 to 5 players of that caliber, then when the U.S. wins the World Cup in 20 years, it is in spite of everyone who whines and moans about the DA. U.S. soccer has created a professionalized path for the 1% of players who are extremely skilled and dedicated, and their families who chose to go on with it. If you don't want to learn how to be a professional, then don't go into it. The players who go in do not have a gun to their head. You may ask the question, do you need to learn how to be a professional at 13? Is that really necessary? Well, if the best players in the world, and remember, we are competing on the world stage, go professional at 16, then yes, they need to begin to learn how to handle themselves as pros at 13 because their apprenticeship will only last 3 years before they are on the field playing against the Lionel Messis of the world. But it is a choice, and it is a setup you choose to be in, and you know what you are getting into. But stop whining that the DA has ruined soccer in this country. It has its faults for sure. It can be pompous, it can be elitist, and it does squabble with a fractured landscape where everyone squabbles with each other. But it is not the reason your kid, who's never going to play pro or for the U.S. national team, anyways, 4th division team, has to travel an hour to play a game on a Sunday morning. The game has been professionalized, yes. U.S. soccer has played its part, yes. And the DA itself is far, far, far from perfect. But there are plenty of paths to choose and plenty of ways to have the experience you want to have in youth soccer. Now, I'm sure Charles, along with every keyboard warrior with a Twitter account, has plenty that they disagree with. But Charles is man enough to have a reasonable and diplomatic conversation with me without calling me names. So, Santa Claus,
Don't get ahead of yourself,
what do you
pal.
disagree with from my rant?
Wow. No, I think you deserve
Slow
the
clap
spotlight. Yeah,
for
just
that.
like-
definitely.
there you go.
And also,
I
this,
wish I'd brought my soccer parent collapsible lawn chair.
Well,
so that I
apologies.
could
And
have been
by
more
the-
comfortable.
So the feat of strength is you have to talk longer now.
For the listening audience, there is smoke coming out of Mark's ears right now. Physical smoke.
That's just because I'm out of shape, though.
I feel like the most efficient and useful response I can offer is where are the players? How many? You name 4 American players that are playing at a high level in a world-class league,
Yeah, but
world-class competition day in, week in, week out.
that's the best of the best.
It's true, like-
there's still other players that are
DeAndre
good supporting
Yedlin.
cast for them.
Yeah, so let's run them down. Yedlin, If we're talking about, I mean, I'm not calling these players world class, but these are players playing in highly elite environments, right? That have earned money for somebody that played a role in their development. Tyler Adams, Christian Pulisic, DeAndre Yedlin, Weston McKennie. Who else do we want to include?
Gio Reyna just got signed for an
Gio Reyna has yet to make his first team debut. He probably will. Looks like he's on a Pulisic-like trajectory, quite possibly.
Tim Weah spent some time in the academy, even though he's been in Europe.
He's been injury racked, but yeah, I agree. So we're in the half dozen range here, right? And this is 12 years of development academy play.
Yeah, but
Is this our ROI?
John
Is this the
Harkes,
norm?
Tab Ramos, Alexi Law. I'm just naming you play Landon Donovan. There was no DA
30
back then.
years ago, right? Okay, yeah. So we have, I think we've definitely got donut holes in our flow of talent. I could argue even it's more like Swiss cheese than a donut hole. But
bring the Swiss into
I'm
this.
not. I reserve the right to be underimpressed by this ROI. It's approaching a 9-figure overall investment. Maybe already past it in terms of what all the players in the DA trying to grow elite players are spending over the last 12 years. I think we're probably easily into the 9 figures. And that's our ROI?
I think the question is, how long is U.S. Soccer going to stay in the DA business? If the pro clubs do spin off from and have their own competition, especially with how much the second and now third divisions have grown into fully professional clubs, in 3 or 4 years, are there 30 or 40 professional academies that are literally tapped or tipped at the pyramid with a team that actually can sign them? And when that happens, is it U.S. Soccer taking a bow and saying, we've done enough? We've primed this pump for 20 years, and now we finally have it. And oh my gosh, if we add promotion and relegation to that situation, it just and solidarity payments and everything else, has it been a 50-year experiment since we re-qualified for our first World Cup since 1950? And we will have also had a 2026 World Cup here, which is going to probably bring another $100 to $300 million into the coffers for U.S. Soccer and or the foundation, or however they make money off of that event. So, is this just them, U.S. Soccer, doing a new frontier, or are they going to be in the league business forever?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a structural sort of an ideological question in some ways, and I don't know if we really know the answer, because there are probably examples of the Federation getting involved in something that involves power and or revenue streams and handing it back. I know I know there are situations where that's happened, but in general, the instinct of the current culture at Soccer House is to lead, to control, to orchestrate, and I think they need to show us a little more track record of being hands off in this regard. I mean, to me, they're up to 150 or thereabouts total clubs in the DA. Member clubs.
I don't know if it's that high,
or maybe 140. I thought in total, not just limiting it to all those who compete at all levels. I mean, it's large and it's growing, and I think it could double or triple in size, and you're still not casting a full net over the enormousness of this country.
Well, let me ask you a question, because one, it goes into the professionalization of youth sports. The second is we talk about this net. Why can't we, and it would take a lot of structuring and a lot of time and a lot of squabbling, but why can't we have the DA, have that net, and then have another net that goes outside of the DA as well? Why does there only have to be one net?
I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that's a shift in mentality, right? So we are used to this idea that there's one answer, and it touches back on the college soccer question, right? College soccer is bound by these multiple forces, internal and external, some of which the actors have control of and some of they don't. And in the same way the Federation is bound, MLS is bound, they all carry this unique, the various sets of abilities and disabilities and weak spots and strong points. And I think the pragmatic approach typically has been to just keep, even if it's chaotic, let multiple options be out there and compete. I just think that right now the network of incentives and subsidies and directives and the hand that the various rules and regulations have are not necessarily fostering an equal decentralized competition among different ideas.
So my question about some of the DA, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier about is it going to go to the professional clubs only? Is, my concern is the cost. And when you get too many teams that are outside the professional ranks, where the fees to play are $3,500 to $7,500 flat out, just what they pay the clubs plus their travel. What you really have is an ecosystem that's being almost duping half or more than half of the rosters of more than half of the clubs that are in the DA into funding the 6 or 7 kids on those teams that are really, really good. And I think that's a reality. And no coach of one of those teams, no director of one of those clubs, or not no, but very few of them are willing to say so. If they actually, and you talk about the size of the net, it's not the net size, it's what's being done to actually develop players for what? For college, for professional, and so forth. So I think we are 12, 13, 14 years into a really good experiment, and it's producing players. I think the quality of play is better in a lot of the youth stuff, but we're not producing players that are ready to compete on the international stage. Just look at our youth international teams. They're just not competing at anything major.
I just want to say we do have to be careful when we talk about DA clubs as professional versus DA clubs that aren't. As I had one coach say to me, you don't have to have a professional team to be a professional development academy. This particular team has players that go and they train with pro teams, and some of them are signing in Spain. Other players are getting D1 scholarships. Other players are featuring on the national teams on both the boys and the girls side. So we have to be careful when we talk about which are pro development academies. I just realized you can't see me sitting in the studio using quotes as I say that, but
quote unquote.
We have to use quote unquote pro development academies and non-pro development academies, because I think it's down to the development academy, whether they have a professional team at the top of their pyramid or not, to decide whether they are professional development academies or not. Because there are a lot of players coming through development academies who don't have professional teams at the very top of the pyramid, who are still sending players pro and sending them to the U.S. youth national teams.
For sure. I don't think that my point was it really should be paid. Right. So how does a youth club pay that doesn't have a pro team make the decision to make it a cost-free environment? So if USL and MLS team up and break away an academy, and now you've just lost all of those teams, what's going to be left? There will still be a national league.
Becomes a year-round national league. Like USYS National League, and
right.
And here's the thing: I don't know. To me, that's such a Pyrrhic quote, victory or move by the professionals, because they don't want to. They're going to incur enormous costs as well. Like right now in Liga MX,
probably why they might not do it. It's probably the only reason they haven't done it yet.
In Liga MX, the youth teams travel with the senior team. They play at the same venues the day before, the day after the senior team's league match. So think about these. They already limit the number of charter flights their own first teams can
MLS
make.
tried that 12 years ago. It lasted all of one season, right? Where they sent the reserve teams along to the same schedule.
Right. The reserve team got folded into USL, what's now USL Championship for the most part because of this. And the scale of things, I just still, I'll just speak in I statements here and be opinionated for a moment. I think there's still there's Microsoft Windows mentality. That's a top-down mentality. We're going to orchestrate things, and then the actors within it, the clubs and players and coaches, will act the way we think they should, thinking kind of up here at the top of the pyramid, and they will all act according to the way that benefits that we think is for the mutual benefit, and try and orchestrate player development as opposed to a Linux open source mentality where, hey, okay, look, the DA is big, and it could be even bigger, and yeah, it could get unwieldy, so let's radically regionalize it. Let's have multiple DA clubs in every state of the union, lower the barriers of entry a bit, maybe allow them to use, to not have full control of their fields. I think back to some of the stuff that got McLean kicked out of the DA in those early years, right? Well, you guys are having training sessions at 9 p.m. because you don't have your own fields. Well, that's their situation. That's their reality. Acknowledge the specific, unique realities and struggles that smaller clubs face. Let's have multiple DA clubs in a place like, let's say at least two, even in a place like Montana, so that kids don't have to uproot their lives or families have to drive 5-hour round trips, You know, we talk about Clint Dempsey's inspiring story of going to Dallas from Natchitoches instead of as like inspiration, right? Instead of like, wow, that's a jacked up system. Let's make it so players like that don't have to do that, right? Radically decentralize and take your hands off the levers a little bit and let things work more organically.
Franchise it out, right? I mean, what you're really saying, because what is the DA if you get too many? Because the whole point is U.S. Soccer wants the clubs to live up to a minimum standard, and the more of them you have, the harder it is. Speaking back to McLean, I mean, I think they'll probably tell you that they didn't want to be in the academy anymore anyway, perhaps. But I'm sure there's a lot of clubs since that happened that have fallen below standards that haven't been kicked out. It just feels like they went from we're going to make sure that you're almost perfect and give you 3 years of warning to we're just going to grow to a point. So if you're not regulating what the club standards are and you're involved, where's double passes? Are they still around? Like, they're still making their rounds, but you've heard very little about clubs being booted from the DA since.
Well, you talked about Microsoft Windows. Charles Boehm and Chris Hummer are the paperclip that pop up and says, looks like you want to restructure the DA system. Can I help?
I see you're trying to grow professional players. Here's some advice with that.
And so we're going to step aside here and catch our breath as we go into halftime here at the Soccer Wire podcast. But going into the start of the second half, we want to take a look at how the professionalization of youth soccer by the U.S. Soccer Federation has affected soccer outside of the federation itself. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we will discuss that here on the Soccer Wire podcast. Soccer Wire is the place for prospective recruits to list themselves and promote their profile to thousands of daily readers, including college coaches, scouts, and more. All recruits can list themselves for life for a small one-time fee. Already committed? Congratulations! All commitments can be reported for free and are included in our nationwide soccer recruiting and tournament wire to over 65,000 people each Thursday. Visit SoccerWire.com to create your player profile today. Welcome back to the second half kickoff of the Soccer Wire podcast. We'd like to start by saying thanks to everyone who listened and commented on last week's show, although I know you guys didn't because I wasn't there. And we encourage everyone to share, like, subscribe, and rate us. Also, feel free to reach out to us on email at news@soccerwire.com with news tips, comments, and your own college commitment news. We finished the first half of the Soccer Wire podcast by talking about how the U.S. Soccer Development Academy has professionalized the youth game. And to be honest, I had something to kick off this second half of the Soccer Wire podcast. But damn it, Quinn, you had a great question. And it's a much better way to lead into the second half. So go ahead. You have the honors for kickoff.
Oh, that's an honor for you to say that, Mark, after that world-class rant you opened up with the last segment.
And by the way, we obviously got a chance to talk about it, and Quinn, Chris, Charles had a chance to answer. If you have your own take on that rant, whether it be positive or negative, by all means, go to Twitter @TheSoccerWire, comment there, or comment on Facebook. I promise I won't get too upset other than crying to Chris on the phone other than that. But otherwise, go ahead, comment there. Anyways, Quinn, back to you.
Right. So just after that last segment, we had a lot of back and forth. Obviously, a lot of people generally on Twitter, like you said, they'll take a very anti-U.S. soccer stance. And it seems like in some people's eyes, the Federation can never do anything right. They're always idiots, etc. Whereas other people might be a little bit more favor. They love the DA, things like that. So I think the most constructive thing to do, the most constructive way to approach it is to ask both, the people who follow soccer and who are passionate about soccer in the U.S. should ask themselves, and U.S. soccer should ask themselves, what is a quantifiable measurement of success in terms of results on the field for our national teams and number of players, world-class players that we produce, a la Christian Pulisic, and just say, hey, we'll consider the DA a success if it produces X number of world-class players, and we will consider U.S. Soccer and our program a success if we do X on the field. So that's my question is, what's your specific answer to that? And just how do you feel about approaching it that way in general?
Charles, thank you for putting up your hand. I will call on you.
I want to start. I think we need to be clear here too. The men's and women's / boys and girls environments are significantly different. There are common themes. They're run by the same federation, but it's a really different landscape. And I always want to try and start with that to know that we want to be inclusive. We cover both. They're at different places. We have to say the women's game in this country and the women's developmental paradigm is not perfect, but they're the three-time world champions, back-to-back, reigning right now.
The results speak for themselves.
We have 4 stars on our shirt, baby.
Excuse me, I lose count. That's how many. I lose count. I'm old. I remember when we couldn't win the big one for a decade or so there, right? And so that I think is a less pressing, for lack of a better term, matter. I think there's more flaws to attack on the men's side, and results bear that out. And results are always, in a game that's so diverse and subjective, results have to always be the end
if you're looking at it like a triage thing, our men's team is on the ground. Yeah. So
there's vital organs that have been
no question
that have been affected. So having said that, look, qualification for the World Cup. I think we came to see it as the baseline, and it probably should be.
Well,
let's get back to that.
Not for Jurgen Klinsmann. He got fired anyway, and he actually advanced in the World Cup.
So he got fired because it looked like he wasn't
that's
gonna
actually
qualify.
I want to let you guys finish, but that's actually a great example because Jurgen Klinsmann, in my opinion, him getting fired was a great example of us as a soccer nation not clearly defining our standards and expectations, and then somebody who actually advances in the World Cup and has a lot of good things happening, gets critiqued to death, and then we lose sight of what he actually did with the team. So, and now we're where we are now, in my opinion, as a result of that. So
the name Jurgen Klinsmann is like spraying gasoline on the modest fire you have, right? It always threatens to spin things out of control because he inspires strong opinions, in part because he got us talking and thinking about a lot of these issues we're talking and thinking about today. I think it used to be that we took it for granted that the baseline was qualification, and then it was all about the reason we hired Jurgen was how do we get out of the group stage reliably, right? We were good at what we were good at. We got good at getting through CONCACAF and getting the World Cup, and then the idea was we have to advance and evolve. And that process, we were unable to keep what we had and add to it, right? And so, but I think that should still be the baseline. Is like a quarterfinal should be the realistic goal in every cycle.
Yeah, I think the metric on the girls' side,
and on all levels, by the way, our youth national teams are the canaries in the coal mine, and we need to be qualifying for all of their World Cups as well, and going into the knockout stages.
And the U20 women are trying to go for 10 out of 10 U20 World Cups. So I think the metric, though, on the girls' side is so different because of the success that they had. The metric on the girls' side now is, okay, all these other countries are building up programs. They're building up their youth systems from the bottom up. They're creating that pipeline that we've essentially had for years. How do we stay ahead of them? How do we stay on top? And is that going to happen? And my thing, and this is a whole other podcast, but it might need to change. And change is something that we, quite frankly, don't really do very well. But it might need to change because at the U20 Nike International Friendlies, both Brazil and France, I would say about 70 to 80% of those girls, some of them only 17 years old, were already featuring for their professional side, for their senior sides in their professional leagues. Well, our girls were still either in high school or were in college at the time. And then there was one player who already had a winner's medal with Olympique Lyonnais, and half of the French team wasn't even allowed to come because their clubs wouldn't release them for the Nike International Friendlies because it wasn't a FIFA-mandated window. So how is the U.S. going to adjust to that on the women's side? And it starts with our DA, and then it starts with whether or not our players go pro at 16, 17 on the girls' side into the NWSL the way they do in Brazil and France, or if we can sustain the college model before going pro and still be the best team in the world. With that said, is everybody good here? Because I'd like to move on to something within this sphere. Mr. Hummer?
Well, yeah, I mean, you talk about NWSL and the women's game, and obviously my ears perk up even more. But it is probably another podcast. But the general position I have on that is, we've been caught. We've won the last 2 World Cups, on talent and athleticism, combination of the two. But we've been outplayed, in the game itself, in a technical level. And it's to see how quickly these other countries, the traditional soccer countries, have come on strong is a big concern. So, we've spent the last 2 episodes and now this one talking about professionalization, and we have talked a little bit too much about the boy side of it, at least maybe not too much, but not brought up the girl side of it. One bookmark here is we're talking about professionalization in that there's money in the game. I would be willing to predict that 75% of the cash flow in the youth industry of soccer comes from female players. And that's a combination of there's more girls that play the game in organized period, and there are just so many more boys that play the game that are on scholarship, if you will, because there's so many other team sports options for talented male athletes. That it just any club team usually has 3, 4, 5 boys on their teams that are getting half or even full scholarships, and there's very few girls that need scholarship. It's just a reality from what I've seen. So that's just something we want to always think about.
Well, we've talked a lot about the DA. We've talked a lot about the men's side. Now, Charles, this is a question for you from both the men's and the women's side. And this is actually what I was going to lead with. But Quinn, such a brilliant question. Thank you for stepping in with that, because that was really the right way to start that off.
By the way, did you answer the question? How many world-class players should U.S. soccer produce over the next 10 years to be a success?
Charles?
Anybody?
For the DA to be a success? Or
yeah,
for
yes.
The national?
For us to say it's working.
Yes.
Everything's working.
Again, Pulisic might be a once-in-a-generation guy already, starting at a club like Chelsea. But, a success, you've got to have, I would say, most of your starters in your national team playing for the types of clubs that people wear their jerseys for all around the world. That could be LA Galaxy or Atlanta United, if they're big enough clubs that kids in Europe are wearing their jerseys. But you got to have a national team full of star players for top 50 clubs in the world.
Well,
wouldn't it be cool if somebody high up at U.S. Soccer, either in the next few years, put their own job on the line and said, we're going to do this, we're going to produce this level of players, or I have failed personally, like put your name on it. Wouldn't that be a great level of accountability?
I think that's really hard, though, because you can look at other countries with great youth systems like Portugal, Belgium to a lesser extent. Even they have golden generations, and they go through periods where they don't produce players. Then you have a footballing nation like France that is just a pipeline of amazing players. So, I think it's really hard to just put an arbitrary number on it. But, guys, we've talked a lot about...
It's not an arbitrary number if you have a plan. If you like, to me, this is like one of the things I love about FC Barcelona. It's the same in many Spanish clubs. The director, and it certainly has negative consequences as well, but the people who are going to make be on the board, run the club, make the professional and soccer decisions, have to say, here's what I'm going to do, here's who I'm going to sign, here's how we're going to play, and this is what I'm going to bring to the table as a leader. And in X number of years, if they've not done that, they have to go back in front of the same voters and either get killed or get usurped. I mean, metaphorically killed, and criticized, and they have to stand up and defend their record, and either they win or they lose the election. Right now, I thought we would maybe have that moment in the 2018 presidential election for the Federation. Arguably, that we did. We came as close to that as we've done in the modern era. My great hope is that at the end of Carlos's current term, he has to go up there and explain himself, say what he did, and we revisit the campaign promises. And that the people that cast those votes have a critical mentality and relatively high expectations for the organization and its leaders.
Well, I would love to see that happen. Right now, though, my concern is that, just like you said, we've been talking a lot about the men. We haven't talked enough about the women. We've been really focusing on the point 0.01% of U.S. youth soccer at the moment. So, Charles, I want to ask you, how has the advent of the DA affected the other 99.9% of youth soccer leagues and organizations across the country?
I think it's profound. It's profound. Anytime if someone came to your house and said, "I'm going to build another floor on top of your house and live in it," right? Like there's no escaping that. Had a sooner or later, had this effect on recruitment, on coaching hires, on budgets, on all sorts of things. It created a new class of winners and losers. Maybe not created, but it certainly created an environment where there were a different set of stimuli. There's a different set of motivations, different set of metrics. And so, yeah, it's huge. Again, I always compare it to the federation went from being the referee to being another team in the league.
And they built the analogy, we go in a lot of areas like that, but they built it without applying for a permit or actually hiring an architect first, because the DA was launched basically on an idea and as a reaction with 6 months notice. It's
not an accident that it was 3 years before they passed the no high school rule and went to the formal 10-month calendar where kids had to promise not to play in any other competitions for any other teams. I mean, the biggest thing, I think, whether it's positive or negative, that you can say objectively is that it unleashed a strong degree of control over the actors within the system: clubs, coaches, players. Everybody had to sign up and meet a certain level.
It was an idea. It was people in a boardroom that had an idea and they said, "Hey, let's do this. We have the money. Let's do it." And the reaction, as I mentioned on previous podcast, is the original plan, Project 2010, for those which was the residency academy, was started with the idea of the goal, like you said, set a goal of winning the Men's World Cup by 2010. Was really expensive. I've heard numbers like $5 million. They spent on the Bradenton Academy. So
in a year, you mean, or total?
I might be getting confused. They were spending $5 million a year on the Development Academy overall, with the flying the teams out, doing the national championship. But Bradenton was definitely over $1 million a year that they were. I don't know if they outsourced to IMG or how they did it, but the idea was to have.
I have no doubt that there are clubs today, youth academies now, that are spending that much in a year just on their programming.
Oh, for sure. We had
individual clubs.
I would be willing to bet, because I've started 2 development academies on the girls' side, that the annual budget for a development academy is $400,000 to $550,000 just to have 5 or 6 teams. So imagine some of these clubs, the budgets that they're running.
Well, gentlemen, our referee Bridget Baker has blown the whistle for the second half hydration break. As this issue has heated up things in the studio, we definitely need to get some water and cool off a bit, which will no doubt mean extra stoppage time. We will conclude the podcast with producer Bridget Baker dropping some deets about Soccer Wire's featured players, and Chris Hummer will take us into stoppage time with his monumental closing segment, Heard on the Wire. Get your club or league in the game with Soccer Wire, the leading community news, advice, and search engine for youth soccer. For a base annual fee, we'll take a huge bite out of your marketing and branding so you can focus more on where the cleats touch the turf. The best part? All the extra branding and benefits are free because the full price of the annual membership is returned to you in advertising credits. We have 3 great options that are sure to meet the marketing and advertising needs of your organization. For more information, visit soccerwire.com and click Be a Premier Partner under the Premier Partner section on the left side of the page, or email ads@soccerwire.com. That's ads@soccerwire.com. Welcome back to the weekly Soccer Wire podcast. I'm Mark Serber, and joining me now is the one and only Bridget Baker, editor, producer, and feature player correspondent. She does it all, and she's here once again to highlight the most recent featured player on Soccer Wire.
Thanks, Mark. It's always a boost of self-esteem getting intros from you.
You deserve it.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate it. I want to go ahead and welcome our newest featured player, Cameron Miller, on SoccerWire.com. Cameron is a goalkeeper for the class of 2021. She's playing in the ECNL for Richmond United. And her player profile with her detailed information, along with all of our featured players, can be found on soccerwire.com. I also want to give a quick shout out to our new premier partners in Virginia Development Academy and Prince William Soccer. They join our already great group of partners, and more information on these and a list of our partners can be found at soccerwire.com/premier-partners, or you can always feel free to give me an email at bbaker@soccerwire.com and we can discuss the best options for your organization. We've also got several featured tournaments with upcoming application deadlines for you guys to keep an eye on. The Premier Cup in San Antonio, Texas, with the weekend of March 13th through the 15th. Their applications are closing on February 15th. Generation Adidas National Cup, hosted by one of our partners, Club Champions League, held in Richmond, Virginia, February 15th through the 17th. Their applications closing December 31st. You want to go ahead and get those applications in ASAP. Loudoun Soccer College Showcase in Leesburg, Virginia, another one of our partners, Loudoun Soccer. Their showcase is held March 6th through 8th, and their applications close February 10th. VDA College Showcase in Woodbridge, Virginia, the weekends of February 8th for the girls and February 15th for the boys. Those applications are closing January 12th. And I also want to congratulate our partner Club Champions League on the launch of CCL New England, which I think Chris is going to be talking about this exciting news on his Heard on the Wire segment. So I'll go ahead and pass the ball back to you now, Mark.
Bridget, excellent work. Your technical skills are wonderful. I never miss the ball. I drop it a lot, but I never miss it. So, yeah, you've heard him, but first of all, thank you, Bridget. And we're rooting for you, Cameron, as well as everyone who is looking to take the next step, not only in their soccer careers, but their academic ones as well. As it's now time to bring Soccer Wire founder Chris Hummer back into the fold for Heard on the Wire.
Thanks, Mark. And like we talked about, one of the things on Heard of the Wire I want to start out with right off the top is the CCL. And for those of you who are in the national audience, CCL stands for Club Champions League. They started as a club-focused league called VCCL, Virginia Club Champions League, in the late 90s. And they were the first league to go with what's called a fully club-centric model, which means that the only teams, if you will, that play in the league are teams from the 10 or so clubs. They started with 5 originally, but every team in your club in the age groups they offer has a slot automatically. It's not about entering one team. You enter your whole club in the league. And then the best part is the scheduling gets stacked. So your director of coaching, or you can have multiple teams coached by the same coach. All the scheduling is the whole club travels to the other club. And they don't even really set the individual schedules. They just say Club A is playing Club B on this date at Club B. And then they let the directors work out the scheduling. So if they chose, they could do U19s and then U13s and then U15s if they wanted to. They just let them work it out. Basically get out of the way administratively and let the coaches figure out the best way to structure their teams and their players. And of course, they have the club pass system where players can play up without it being a big deal, et cetera, et cetera. So they've been quite successful in the D.C. area. They have member clubs now in Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland. And they've been in talks for over a year with the NSL in New England, in the Boston area. And they just yesterday announced the launch of CCL New England. And I spoke to them this morning before we came on the air. And they were all really excited. This was a long time in the making, and they wanted to stress that it's going to be a slow, methodical approach to what they're trying to do, so that it's not meant to be like day one. It's supposed to be this complete project and so forth. So they're just going to follow the model they started when they started their league in the Virginia area, which is they're seeking 5 clubs to start. They're going to go 11 through 15s, and boys and girls for sure. It won't be closed to any club that might be in the DA or ECNL. So, there used to be rules that you had to have your top team play in order to be in the competition. That's not the case. There are a lot of really big clubs that have proven that they can field competitive teams in multiple leagues. So it's they're going to get a lot of. It's actually an organization that's owned, operated by the Virginia version. So it's not like they're rebranding the NSL league. They're just partnering with them to really support it. And it who knows how many clubs they'll have first year. They're going for 5. If they have enough interest and commitment, they could do more. But we'll see where that goes. But it's congratulations to them. I think it's they're U.S. Youth Soccer affiliated. So and our listeners can correct us, but I believe they may be now sort of the first club-centric focused league under the U.S. Youth Soccer structure that has now conferences and more of a regional basis. It's not just the teams playing each other within their own drivable distance.
And what are the benefits to this system?
Well, again, I think I talked about it at the beginning. I mean, there's lots of it, but if you think about the ease in just scheduling 2 clubs, and again, you couldn't do that if you were only accepting teams. And we've all seen this in youth soccer when we were growing up, that a lot of teams were really just, they had a club name attached to them because that was the club that sort of gave them fields, but they were run, each team was its own little business. And the idea of sharing a player with the older, it was just not happening. So for clubs that have taken the professionalized approach, to keep with our theme of having technical staff that are paid, that have a holistic view to the entire market, where they are about identifying and progressing players. Playing your league competition in this type of format is way better than having your U14 team be average and playing in Division III of League A, and your U15 and your U13 teams being like state cup champions and playing in the first division of League B. And those games get scheduled at the same time on a Saturday, 100 miles apart. So that's really the biggest benefit. Business-wise, they're very professionalized in their management, so they have the ability. They have a good partnership with Adidas and Soccer.com, for one example. So the bigger they get, the more they can sort of aggregate corporate support and so forth. So they also have a couple of big events in the Virginia market, and they said they might expand that into the Boston area as well.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. You can certainly look out for more stories emerging on SoccerWire.com. Moving on, speaking about professionalization, the next story that you have here on Heard on the Wire is about a kid who could very well have a future playing 2 professional sports if things go his way.
Yeah, this is you guys brought this to my attention, so it's Heard on the Wire, right? But it's funny. Was it yesterday or today? Wednesday or Tuesday was signing day for football. Today. So today, we're recording this on Wednesday, was National Signing Day for college football, and a kid by the name of Tanner Tessman got listed for Clemson, who's a pretty darn good football team, Pointy football, and his youth organization was listed as FC Dallas. So
one of the best youth football gridiron associations in the country.
Right, exactly. So he is going again. Dallas is a hotbed for college. I mean, for high school football, Pointy football for sure.
We should also mention that Tanner Tessman, not only, you obviously know FC Dallas, but he's also a youth national team player. So he's in the pool. So anyways,
so he's playing for Clemson soccer, but he's on a football scholarship. So that'll be interesting to unpack how they're basically getting their soccer program sounds like they're getting a free player.
Well, and this goes back to what we talked about earlier with the NCAA, just to give you an insight into them and what they think about soccer versus football, is if a player goes and is playing multiple sports, but they're playing football, you have to list them as a football player.
Okay, right, and that we should be clear. I don't think I mentioned he's signing for Clemson football as a kicker. So, he's not going to be like wide receiver.
He's
or
not running over the middle, getting slammed, and then asked to go play for 90 minutes.
Right. In fact, and who knows if he'll be first team or not. But I kicked high school football. I mean, you don't really need to practice very much. You kind of come in at the end and you help with the sprints at the end, or you go through a couple of with the full team so you can practice getting the ball over the line. But I'm sure he'll be with the soccer team most of the time.
I think another interesting thing, Chris, is that his father has a very close relationship with Dabo Swinney.
Yeah. I mean, again, let the rumor mill go from there. It's certainly not my wheelhouse. So I wrote an article this week that started as a LinkedIn post to announce, sort of get people to listen to our 2 previous podcast episodes about the professionalization of the game. And it quickly, I blinked and it was 1,500 words. So we wrapped it into an article about, about pay to play, to kind of really sort of giving a history about how the youth soccer went from being a parent-run volunteer sport in the 70s all the way up to the things we've been discussing. And we got a really good feedback article from a gentleman or gentlelady who is still anonymous, because I replied to it asking for permission to reprint it. So if I hear back from them, we'll do something like that. But the core of the feedback was just, and we keep talking about this, is the feeling, and he has experience in Spain mostly, the focus on developing players technically versus the focus, even in the best clubs here in the United States, that we have a team-based system. Even to speak of the club centricity that we talked about with CCL, it's still, this cycle of we're going to train, play a game, train and play a game, train, play a game, train, go to a showcase. And when you teach a team that way, he mentions lots of examples, but you spend the few hours you have as a coach practicing how to play between the lines, how to break down a bunker defense, or these sorts of big field tactic stuff, which is all the things that you should be talking about, but it's at the sort of absence, or taking away focusing on their technical skills, mostly your spatial relationships and your decision making as an individual player. And his point was, the rest of the world really values and focuses on what a player should look like. And again, we keep going across this in so many areas. Is we talked today about the net of the scouting net, and it's not the size of the net. It's what are they picking? What type of players are they picking? And I don't think we have a clue, or what type of players and then who's the we. But it was really good. So hopefully he responds, and we can sort of package that up and put it as an article out for our readers. We certainly encourage other people that have a lot of knowledge or strong opinion to send us 500 to 1,000 words and with their own thoughts, and let us know your credentials, and we'll work with you to maybe share your story.
Where should they send that to?
Wow. Just go to the Contact Us link on soccerwire.com and just click the news lead. It's a news tip or leads option, and you can just send it to us. The form should take it from there.
And one of your favorite topics that seems to pop up every week, it's referees again.
Yeah, well, it comes up all the time, so it's always heard on the wire. Maybe I've said it before, but I'm trying to work on a longer form piece, and we'll do a future episode about it. But there is a huge referee shortage in this country, and it goes directly to the quality. So here in this off season, now that we're all kind of taking a break, there's going to be
We are
from the league play.
Gotcha.
It's a great opportunity. All of a sudden, the referee websites are being lit up with the scheduled referee sessions again. So, please go out and it only takes an afternoon. Mostly you do an online course from U.S. Soccer, and then you have to attend a field session, and you can get licensed and go give it a try. And I'm saying you as in, the older folks, the coaches, the people who already played the game, not just, getting the 15-year-olds or 16-year-olds out there to do it. Interesting tidbit, we're trying to verify this for sure, but to that end, there's a rule in place that was put in a long time ago that any MLS player only has to, I think, pass some kind of like the laws of the game, multiple choice test that they give us at the soccer coaching schools, and you can be a referee. And of all of the players that have ever played MLS, only one has ever taken them up on it and actually refereed, and it's Alexi Lawless.
Well, yeah, if you spent years abusing referees and saying the things that I've heard not only players but parents say to referees at U8 games, why would you want to become a referee yourself? It's straight up masochistic.
For me, it's if you truly, once you're done playing, if you have a passion to improve the game, stop complaining about the referees and go become one. At the very least, reffing a game 3 or 4 times might give you, especially if you're coaching kids. The other thing is there's lots of opportunities. Summer camps. This was a huge idea that sounded great to me. If you're running a summer camp out there, you can just arrange with the referee trainer to come to, like, it's a 4-day camp. They send kids to like swimming parks and stuff in the afternoons in the summer. Have a referee assigner come out, an educator come out and certify the kids. And now you're going to have 30, 40, 18-year-olds that are new referees in the system. Same thing for the clubs. It doesn't take long. So, literally in the time it takes you to drive 100 miles to go play a game where you beat somebody 8-0 when you're 17 years old, you could literally take your whole team and go get your referee license.
Well, and from referees to some players in a league where they sometimes have choice words for referees, Reign FC and NWSL General have some big news.
Yeah, well, NWSL doesn't have that many choice words for referees because the referees hardly call anything. But, did I just complain about referees after doing a spot about we need more referees? So huge news. I guess it's going to be official probably by the time you're listening to this on Thursday. But here on Wednesday, it's been pretty much confirmed that Reign FC, formerly Seattle Reign and NWSL, are being purchased by Lyon, which is the most successful international club, women's club in the world.
Olympic Lyonnais.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. It's been rumored for years. I used to work in NWSL, so even before public news came out, it was Lyon are looking to do this, to get involved in some way, just like Barcelona have said they're going to get involved. So it's really exciting. With the new rules that NWSL has put out, they've increased the salary caps now to, I think it's $600,000 a year, which is, I think, twice what it was in the first year. They've also allowed the clubs to do $300,000 additional dollars that they can basically buy in allocation money. So you're essentially, if you played it perfectly and you don't trade any of it away, if it is even tradable, you're going to have teams that can now spend $900,000 a year. And bigger, just as big as that, is they've gotten rid of the housing cap, which used to be, I think last year it was probably $45,000 or $55,000. I don't know what the rules are going to be where they have, you get rid of the reason it got in the first place was the pay was so low at the beginning of the league that the wealthy owners were putting the international players in like super luxury apartments, like basically, hey, we're going to give you a $10,000 a month type of penthouse as a form of compensation. So they might, I don't know if there's going to be rules about, on an individual basis, how much you can spend per player, but it's going to be year round and no caps. So that on top of the additional money, and kudos to the owners for stepping up to do that, because it's and now Lyon coming in is I wouldn't be surprised if it was contingent, if they were like, we're not doing this unless you basically let us spend money and do it right. So very exciting for the Women's Pro League.
Oh, excellent. Can't wait for it to start again. The draft coming up at the soccer convention that will be at the beginning of January in Baltimore. So really excited for that as well. You hear a lot of great things on the wire, Chris Hummer. Thank you so much.
Most of it I hear here on the Soccer Wire podcast.
Yeah.
I love reading headlines on the website that I didn't know happened. Thanks, Quinn.
Yeah, huge shout out to Quinn Castile and Bridget Baker for that, too. So that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Soccer Wire podcast. For coverage of everything youth soccer, be sure to check soccerwire.com, your premier location for the best coverage of the youth game. If there's something we missed or a topic you would like discussed, hit us up on Twitter at @TheSoccerWire or hop over to soccerwire.com and click on the Contact Us link on the bottom of any page. Every Thursday, we put out our National Soccer Recruiting and Tournament Wire, and for those of you in the Mid-Atlantic or Tri-State regions, we send twice weekly local news roundups. Just click on the newsletter link on soccerwire.com to get the best of Soccer Wire in your inbox. We're off next week for the holidays, but we'll be back first thing in 2020 and ready to kick off the new year, diving into more topics that are impacting youth soccer in the United States. We hope everyone has a happy and safe holiday break, and we wish you all the very best in 2020. For Chris Hummer, Quinn Castile, Charles Boehm, and our producer, Bridget Baker, I'm Mark Serber saying thank you for joining us on this Festivus episode of the Soccer Wire podcast.